All right, great. So, hi everyone. Welcome to the first episode of our fireside chat for the month of the year of 2024. And we're really excited to be having this. We have quite a few regulars on the call already, so that's really reassuring that there is value in what we do here. So today on, I have Jonathan. Jonathan Bates Kawachi is going to be our guest for today, and we're going to be having an interesting conversation around business exits, acquisition, and things like that. So what I'm going to do is, rather than introduce Jonathan myself, I'll hand it over to Jonathan to do some introductions before we kick off with the call. So Jonathan, if you want to tell us a bit about yourself, I think what will be particularly interesting would be your background, especially from an early age, just a bit about yourself and, how you've come to where you are today.
Okay. We can go all the way back then,
Okay,
I
yeah.
guess. After I graduated from university, I wasn't really sure what I actually wanted to do in my career, but I knew that I wanted to spend some time overseas. And there was this program at the time that allowed me to go to Japan and study and work there. While teaching English, I was able to learn a lot of Japanese. During my early years in Japan, I developed a strong interest in areas like public policy, and particularly the finance around public policy. And was a research student for a while at one of the universities there, and thought I was actually heading down the academic route. But whatever reason, I was asked to come to interview at Sony, obviously one of the major Japanese corporates, to work in investor relations. And I guess it so happened that I actually had a lot of the financial terminology in Japanese, because I'd been studying public policy. So that came fairly easily to me. But while I was working in investor relations at Sony, I discovered what was probably going to be the major passion during my career, which is investing. So during my time at Sony, I spent a lot of time myself reading, starting to invest, and became very influenced by many of the great investors such as Warren Buffett, Joel Greenblatt, and many others. So having discovered that passion, I then set about to actually make that my full-time job. And through a couple of roles, went to Deutsche Bank, was working on the sell side, then actually came to London Business School to do a master's in finance, because I actually, up until that point, didn't have any qualification in finance. And then after that, worked for Fidelity, then HSBC, then a Swiss asset manager called Pictet. And during that whole time, actually, I was focused on investing in industrial businesses. So I became very familiar with that space. Also, because of my passion for investing, I've also always invested a lot in smaller companies. I find a lot of value in investing in smaller businesses. They're less well known, less understood by the wider community. And so then, probably around 6 or 7 years ago, I started to become more and more interested in the private market, specifically within the UK. I became aware that there are quite a few websites with listings of private businesses for sale. You can find them quite easily with a Google search, and so I started looking through those listings and starting to think what it would be actually like to buy, own, and potentially even run those businesses. Kind of simultaneous to that, I also became through my own investing, became very familiar with quite a few business models that adopt an approach whereby they make multiple acquisitions, but then they do not get too involved in the operational side of the businesses they acquire. Essentially, the businesses are run in a very decentralized way. And one of the benefits of that is obviously, the management teams at those businesses are extremely motivated. They get incentivized, rewarded, and they get to see, their day-to-day activities reflected in the outcomes that they generate. So I became very very impassioned both by the idea of investing in private businesses, but also around the whole kind of philosophy and value that can be generated from businesses being run in a very decentralized way. During COVID, I spent quite a bit of time actually thinking about investing in private businesses with a few partners. But during that time was quite busy with the day-to-day job and actually with my family. We have a 3-year-old son, and he was born in June 2020, so it was quite a busy time in my life. So I took a step back and thought, if I'm going to do this full time, what's the best way to do it? And was planning essentially for the last two years, and then earlier this year made the decision to go for it full. Sorry, it seems like it's still 2023, but I meant to say earlier, probably around April in 2023, I made the decision to do it. And then became full time on it on September the 1st last year. There's another side to the story which I probably haven't told that well thus far. I mean, I've talked mainly about my own kind of motivations for doing it, but there's another side to the story which is I was going to say equally, but I think is actually more important to what we're trying to achieve, and that's the fact that there are, if you look into the private space in the UK, you will see that there are in our estimates probably 10,000 or so, high quality industrial B2B businesses that have between 2 to 15 million in revenue. And by high quality, I mean they make kind of either they provide indispensable products or services for very important global value chains, be it pharmaceutical industry, medical equipment, aerospace, some of the defense value chains, and multiple other areas. Despite probably the perception that the UK manufacturing has, maybe not everyone has this perception, but there's probably a perception out there that UK manufacturing is a tough place to be, and it's been in relative decline over a long period of time. I mean, in reality, it's probably 10% of GDP today, I think, roughly, but it still makes up 40% of exports, and that really shows the strength of British manufacturing products which are still exported to the world. So part of our idea was, can we use this very successful model, which is repeat acquisitions, decentralized business model, to support very established UK businesses on the next stage of their journey. So Winifred, as you kind of alluded to, one of the issues that's facing many established companies in developed markets, not just the UK, is that many of the companies are facing a kind of succession issue. So a lot of business owners are 55 or 65. Some business owners I've been meeting with recently are even 75, 80, and still going very, very strong. Working hard every day, and probably won't leave the business for another 5 to 10 years. So on one aspect, we provide potentially a solution for that. we buy a majority stake in the business, and actually work to enable the succession to the next managers. So they could be the son or the daughter, other relatives within the family that maintain a stake in the business and work with us. They could be other kind of second tier managers that have been working for the business for a long time, are very experienced, but want to step up to running it full time. There are all kinds of solutions like that. And then I guess another part of our proposition, which I've also not mentioned, is my team as well. So I mean, I would recognize that probably my kind of greatest area of being unprepared to do something like this is I've been an investor in businesses over time. I probably looked at thousands of businesses throughout my career. And I think I understand quite well what makes a good business, but at the same time, I've not actually operated a business. So when I started in industries, I set out to surround myself with very experienced and very successful operators. And fortunately, two of them, Duncan Penny and Paul Simmons, decided that they wanted to join the team and pursue this together with me. Duncan was CEO of a company called XP Power for around 17 years, from 2003 to 2020, and grew that business to over $300 million in sales. Paul Simmons was a sector CEO, i.e. he had responsibility for about 50% of the business at a company called Halma. Halma is one of the UK. It's probably much more well known today, but it's probably been one of the UK's hidden industrial champions for the last 10 years. It's now about 7 billion in market cap, or somewhere in those regions. So Paul played a very key role in the growth of that business from 2010 to 2020. The reason I mention both of their experiences, they are partners for N Industries, and they are essentially available as advisors and mentors to the managers and business owners of the businesses that come into our group. They've got an exceptional track record of helping those businesses deliver growth historically, and we feel that having their input and advice availability to those managers is going to enhance the growth and the value of those businesses over the long term. Probably before I realize I've been talking for a while, but probably a last part of what I should say is our model is also we are a permanent owner of the businesses that we buy. This is also quite important, because obviously if you're a founder or you're a business owner, you've built up your business over either a generation or in some cases multiple generations, and the employees are like family to you, and you really care obviously what happens to the business post sale. So we think, as being a permanent owner, we can really look after and support and enhance the legacy of the owner of the business, and help it become an even better business over the long term. So I realize I've mentioned a lot of different things, and probably some people are headed.
I've made notes, so that's fine. But thank you. It was lengthy, but it was very detailed, and I really do appreciate the time that you took to sort of elaborate on all these, fine points. I think there's several things to take into consideration, but before we jump into that, I met Jonathan at a private equity conference in London last year, September, and when we we met at the networking session, and when we had a conversation, I think what really caught my interest with N Industries was the business model, because typically where you hear about private investors, private equity, that kind of stuff, people are a bit reluctant because there's this notion that private equity or investors sometimes might load up the business with debt, might do this, might do that, might sort of change the strategy, and all this negativity that has been pinned on private equity investors. And so when I did hear from Jonathan about the business model they were adopting, where they would be permanent owners, they're not looking to sell off the businesses they acquire. They are looking for the previous owners to be part of the business in some capacity. And they're looking for the businesses they acquire to be significantly autonomous from their own influence. I thought, okay, this is good. This is not this is unique. It's not very common. It's not what you typically see. And so it's now a key. I think when people hear this, they're like, oh, how is that going to work? Is that really true and stuff like that? I think over time, with the more acquisitions that an industries make, we will see, and people will begin to learn that it is actually possible for these kinds of business models to exist. And we're going to come on to the business model soon, but before we go into that area, one key thing that I'd sort of like to hear your take on is succession, because succession is becoming a problem. I was listening, there's a lady I follow closely on YouTube. She's called Cody Sanchez. She's also into investment and buying businesses and stuff like that. And she talked about the succession crisis in Japan at the moment, where the younger generations are not interested in taking over businesses. And she gave this example of this business owner that had to sell off their business because sort of the younger generation was not keen on taking it. They would rather do other things than run these businesses. Now, so it's not only a UK problem, the succession is not only a UK problem. I think it's a generational thing whereby upcoming generations might not necessarily have the same interest as their parents did. And, it will create problems. So when we think about succession on its own, what are your thoughts on this, Jonathan, in terms of the problems that, older people, like you've said, you have older people up until 75, 80 running their businesses. Yes, we do agree that, we have a longer lifespan these days because of the advancement in medicine and science and all that stuff. But sometimes it might just be that they've not found who to take on the business. It might be that, in the family, there's no one interested in taking on the business. So when it comes to succession, what are your thoughts on it, Jonathan?
I mean, succession is the most important topic for those business owners and those founders that have built those great businesses over a long period of time. So frequently they're not looking for a buyer for the business that is going to, as you mentioned earlier, put lots of debt on it, restructure it, or even change it substantially from what it is today. Also, the one of the other concerns is that if you're really thinking about the legacy of the business, then the risk is if you sell to someone who's not going to be a permanent owner of the business post sale, then the business is going to be resold. Maybe in 5 years, maybe in 6 years. So you just don't really know, where the business is going to end up. So I think that's one important topic. The other important topic is, how can the business be sustained going forward? And that answer comes in a variety of ways. So one way is, you pass the management of the business to the next generation. Some of the problems there are that the owner or the founder will likely also want to take some cash out of the business for their own retirement and other they've worked hard to achieve what they've achieved, and they should, to be frank, they should probably take some money off the table and benefit from the wealth that they've created. So we offer both an opportunity to help them cash out, but also have in place our team that I mentioned earlier that can assist the kind of new generation if they stay on with the business, develop the skills to run it successfully. So that's one approach. The other approach is to do something very similar, but with a second tier of management. And I guess a third way is you've got an owner or founder who wants to sell the business. There's no one perhaps in the business that, or in the family, that can take over the running of the business. But then we can also find with our fairly extensive networks, we can find someone who's capable, motivated, for running the business, can over time work to make it a better business. And again, in this situation, the kind of legacy of what the founder and business owner created is still intact. In the best outcome, which is what we aim for, is to actually enhance significantly those businesses over time. Hope that makes sense as an answer. I'm not sure how directly I managed to answer your question.
No, you did a fantastic job on the answering there, because it's always good to have these different scenarios in place, like you said, just in case the upcoming generation is not interested. How do you source other people that can run the business, still maintain the legacy of the business owner and things like that? So I always think it's good to have these different scenarios, because what you're beginning to see with Gen Zs and the rest of them is they have different interests. And I don't think sometimes it does any benefit to force things on people that they're not interested in. They might end up not doing it enough justice. So it's always good to have those things in mind, just in case people get disappointed along the line. But so thanks for that, sharing your thoughts on succession there. Now we're not moving over to your business model. So it's sort of like, so as you spoke, I did take note of some of the statistics that you gave, where you said, yes, certainly one of the key things we've noticed is manufacturing is in decline. In the UK, and there's so many factors for that. China, for one. Secondly, it's just a bit expensive to set up manufacturing here. But again, depending on what you are manufacturing and you're able to manage it, I think it works. But I think what really struck me there was the 40% of UK that manufacturing, what is done here in the UK, makes up 40% of UK exports. And so what I wanted to say is, what drew you to industrial businesses? What was fascinating about it? Because I've spoken to quite a few private equity firm owners, and one key thing you would see around them is really technology-based businesses. So I'd like to know, what's the interest, what's the attraction in industrial businesses for you, John?
Yeah, I kind of partly I kind of fell into it in a way, because I started looking at industrial businesses professionally when I joined Fidelity. But I think it's probably it's the area of the market I'm most passionate about, obviously, because I've been doing it for so long. I think one of the very interesting things is it feeds into almost every other industry. So whether it's consumer, whether it's healthcare, whether it's metals and mining, whether it's electronics, there is some part of that comes from it comes from the industrial supply chain. So really, I'm part of what I love doing is just learning about different industries, different niches, and actually, industrials gives me the opportunity to do that. So that's probably one side. The other side is, you've got some fantastic businesses in themselves, and the way that industrial businesses create value for their customers is is also extremely interesting. You mentioned obviously intellectual property, and that does play a role. But in many cases, your customers for an industrial business will be they might buy a very specific part or component off you that goes into either one of their own products or the production process, and that part or component may make up a very small, probably even less than 1% of the total production cost of the product or the production process. And then there can be actually a big risk around changing the supplier of that part or component. Because if you think about it, if you're running a big automotive or a big aerospace factory with lots of people working there, lots of money spent on equipment and everything like that. If you have any downtime when you're running the factory, it's incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
And so the operators of those plants tend to be extremely risk averse. If something is working, you wouldn't switch out the supplier of that part or component unless you really have to, unless there's a really obvious reason why they're not living up to expectations. But you would do that as almost the last resort.
Okay, fantastic. So I do agree, that there is stability in the industry. And like you said, unlike other industries where it will be quite easy to switch out suppliers or do things like that. I think, like you said, most people that require these parts from industrial businesses will be a bit more cautious. So we currently have 39 people on the call. Again, it's a fireside chat, so feel free to put questions in the chat as usual. So we have a question from Tim. So Tim is in Tacoma, Washington. Now, he says, Jonathan, do you differentiate business holdings by those with stable profits margins to be returned to investors versus firms that require retained earnings for growth, such as purchase of additional equipment, new technologies, expanded marketing, and all? So sort of looking at these two types of businesses and say, how do you make your investment decisions? So I'll leave that to you, Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, there are two options for how an industry two major options initially, because we don't plan to pay dividends or anything like that for the foreseeable future. So cash that comes up to group level either gets reinvested in more acquisitions, or we can use it to enhance or grow the businesses that are our actual operating companies. So as you mentioned, with the conversations we have with actually a lot of the companies we're talking with today, there are actually a lot of latent opportunities for growth. So, for example, hiring an additional salesperson, professionalizing the sales operations can lead to potentially, we think, significant growth. Maybe the management team don't fully realize that the level of pricing power they have for the business, and so there's potentially a couple of things you can do in terms of pricing of the products. And in other situations, there are opportunities to invest in new equipment and go into adjacent markets. We will weigh up all of those opportunities carefully with the management teams, and ultimately, if the opportunities are very likely to significantly enhance the value of the businesses, then that is a very good option for us as well. Tim, I hope that answers your question.
Okay, so Tim, I hope that did justice.
I was just going to highlight one thing. Actually, I forgot to say this when I answered your question on industrial businesses. I think my point earlier was about probably perception. The UK manufacturing or industrial sector is in decline, but my view is actually very strongly that there are a lot of very high quality companies that are thriving, both domestically on the global scene. But obviously, with issues like succession planning, there needs to be some kind of support or partner to be able to kind of give those businesses longevity, and in kind of ensure that they remain very, very successful longer term.
Okay, fantastic. So now we are over 30 minutes into the call, so we're mindful of time. Now, sort of moving on and just taking some time to look at your business model, Jonathan, you've talked about it already, but I think it would just make sense to spend a bit of time on it. So one of the key things, and I'll just take it step by step, is first of all, you aim to be a permanent owner. So you're not looking to sell the business that you acquire, you're in it for the long term. And then you also serve as long-term partners, collaborating closely with management teams. So working to ensure that value is created in the business, and you're there, you're giving the business owners or, the management teams autonomy to run the business as they see fit. Now,
Yes.
and then so autonomy is one thing, permanent ownership is another. Okay. Yeah, so those are the two key things, unless I've missed out anything here. Yeah. So if we think about permanent ownership, where you say you're not looking to sell this business, is because typically, if we look at a business like there used to be this cookie business in the States, and they were acquired by a private equity firm. I cannot just forgotten the name of the private equity firm, right now, but they're acquired by this private equity firm. And over time, what they did was when they acquired the business, they eventually sort of maintain, ran the business for some time, expanded capacity of the business, and afterwards they sold it off to Mondelez. So Mondelez, we know the multinational company. Now, so typically what you see in private equity is that you hardly see private equity businesses or investment businesses that would keep for the long run. Permanent ownership is very unique. So when you say permanent ownership, what are you trying to achieve with this? Because typically, when investors buy businesses, they're looking to grow the business to a certain level, add value, and then hopefully sell it off for a profit. So if you're looking for permanent ownership, which I think is quite attractive to the business owners, how does N Industries gain from this?
Okay, no, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, the proposition to the owner who's looking to protect and enhance their legacy, permanent ownership, I think, gives them that kind of, what's the word, assurity of mind or security of mind. For us, actually becoming permanent owners enables us to think truly long term. So rather than thinking, what can we do to this business over the next 5 to 7 years to maximize the value of selling that business, we're actually able to think, on a 10 to 20 year horizon, even longer, what's going to happen to the end markets that company's involved in. What strategic actions do we need to take over the next 10 plus years in order to position this business correctly? I found taking a truly long-term perspective on both investments and in terms of businesses can help enable some of the best outcomes. So rather, if you're positioning yourself to sell the business in 5 to 7 years, you might be running a leaner ship or cutting costs more than you have to, whereas we can really lean into the business if we think there's a strong growth drivers ahead and a part of the long-term future of the business. Then we can put money to work there to achieve those longer term strategic outcomes. So I think that's a key part of being a permanent owner that leads to better outcomes. And of course, obviously, it gives security and peace of mind to the management teams to also work with us on those longer term outcomes as well.
Great. Thank you. And I always think that, when you're making these acquisitions, you see, it's a game of trust, isn't it? Because, this is somebody that has sort of built this all their life. This is really something they've created, and, they're going to give it up to you. So that there is a high level of trust in what they're doing. So I think there is some kind of duty to them as well to make sure that it's run properly. and permanent ownership might be a way. Some people might argue, oh, no, but I think it does make sense. So moving on, when you also say that you give these management teams that run the business a significant autonomy, what does that look like? Do you
What
want
does that look? Um, the day-to-day running of the business is done by the management teams. In practice, what we actually do is on a monthly basis we go through the numbers, review. We have monthly reporting which goes through P&L, cash flow, balance sheets. We have monthly meetings with the management teams. My partners Paul and Duncan chair the operating companies with those management teams, and they are available as and when the management teams want advice, etc., about key decisions, or they want our input. The parent company, which is us, I mean, we can also provide some resources around market research, looking into new sales opportunities, those type of things. So they get, in addition to their current operations, they get, a few extra people to help them with the business over time. And two of them have excellent track records, obviously having run, two businesses extremely very successfully over their careers. Probably in addition to that as well, you get the benefit of, as we become a larger group, the plan is to share best practice between the different companies. So you might have one company where the marketing person there has done really excellent marketing campaigns, and it's worth transferring some of that knowledge and know-how to other businesses within the group. So we can do that, and we actually over time encourage the owners and employees of the businesses to take actual ownership in the shares of our overall business as well. So everyone starts to think about being an owner or participant in a bigger group, and incentivized and motivated to share best practice between the different companies within the group as well.
Great. Thank you. I think that, the share ownership really struck a chord there, because it does make a lot of difference when people feel like they're part of the business.
Yep.
There's a much more long-term view as opposed to a short-term view of seeing the business do well. So great there. Now, with that in mind, we've looked at these two core elements of your business model: permanent ownership and autonomy. I think the next thing that would like to know a bit more better is, so I know that, I was listening to a podcast with Henry Kravis of KKR. So
Yes.
he and
Yep.
his cousin, I think first cousin, have run KKR for a long time now, and they're gradually stepping down. And they've sort of set up a process of handing over to these new CEOs. Now, the new CEOs taking over from them are not family. In a sense, it's not a bloodline kind of succession. It's people that have been in KKR for a very long time, understand the culture and things like that. But what they do is, so I think they took a 4-year approach where initially they observed these people. I think they had about 5 of them, I think, and they sort of narrowed it down to the 2 that they think were going to do well. And the 2 that they've chosen apparently are good family friends. I don't know whether it's a marketing strategy, but that's what, they claim. But with that in mind, now what they do is on a weekly basis, you see Henry Kravis and his cousin meet up with these 2 CEOs. And, there's always this weekly update of what is happening in the business. So even though they're gradually stepping away, there's still some kind of involvement in how the business is being run. So
Yes.
when you're in a transition mode with one of your acquisitions, what does it look like in terms of the owner handing over the business to you and the management teams that will take over? Do you want to share that with us?
I mean, it can be it can be case by case, to be honest, but usually there's some level of transition between the previous management team and the existing management team. Obviously, our model is, if there are people within the business, either other family members or a second tier management team, we are keen for those if they're capable, to step up and run the business. In some scenarios, we will look for external management if there is no one in the business that can run it post acquisition. But in those scenarios, we have to be very careful about a lot of the know-how, the customer relationships, the supplier relationships that the existing business owner has, and those relationships and know-how has to be properly transitioned to the new manager. Otherwise, that is not just a risk for us, but it's a risk for the future of the business as well.
Great. And so I think that's really great to have that in Planner, because sometimes I think that's a very sensitive time in the life of the business, that transition period. And, if it's not clear what the process is going to be like, sometimes, it might just cause some confusions along the line. So it's good that you've sort of shed some light on that. Now,
maybe just one more thing that's worth highlighting. As part of our due diligence in the acquisition process, we put together a growth plan with the management team. So we basically look at how the different ways in which the business can prosper and under our ownership, and with the autonomous day-to-day autonomy given to the management teams. And we'll make a kind of our investment and acquisition also conditional on having a well thought out growth plan in place.
Okay, great. Now, as we begin to round up, we now have about 62 people on the call. One of the key things, I'd like to know, not me only, but, everyone in the audience as well, is when people, so I've started a business, I've run this business for a time, I've grown into a certain, revenue base. Now that I'm looking to sort of step out of the business to some extent, have some time for myself, travel, do stuff that I actually enjoy. And I'm sort of looking out for an investor or a business partner, somebody that I can hand this business over to run it for me. What would you say makes a good business buyer? What are some of the characteristics? So we're saying we want to put on, wear the hat of the business owner, looking for who to sell the business with. What would you look out for?
Yeah, to be honest, some business owners will have different priorities. Our ideal business owner is one who wants to protect and enhance the legacy of the business that they've built, and hand it over to a new management team that can enhance the value going forward. But to be perfectly frank about it, some business owners will want to maximize the amount of money that they make from the sale. So that's probably inevitable, given some business owners will want that outcome, right? So.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. And now also, so with that in mind, looking for, it depends on what the business owner is looking for. Some of them might be out to maybe that's been their plan all the while, to sell it at some point and really make a huge return and just cash out of the business. And there's nothing wrong there. Some people try to make that look like a noble cause. Yeah.
I should say there's actually another scenario which I probably haven't spoken as much as I should have on this call. There's a scenario where actually the business owner is quite a bit younger, so they're maybe in their 40s and their 50s, but they've still done a great job in growing the business. But they're looking again maybe to take some money off the table. They're also, looking for partners that can maybe, help them move from being a, 5 million turnover company to becoming a 10 to 15 million turnover company. So they're looking for maybe expertise that can help them on the next stage of that journey. So, that's also a key part of our business model as well, is helping those type of owners. So we actually find those owners are, if they're in our model, they're able to keep a retained stake in the business, so up to 25%. So also share in the profit growth of the business over time. So that basically enables them to, continue to grow alongside the business over time, and is, within a decentralized model. Again, the outcomes are the result of people being motivated, and as a result, they can really, again, get rewarded for their performance. So I think it often leads to a win-win-win for everyone involved, including the employees, the managers, and also us as owners of the business as well.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for that. I think that's also an interesting angle to come from. Now, as we do have quite a lot of entrepreneurs on the call at the moment, and if people are looking to grow, because what you begin to see is there was a time I sort of compiled some statistics about business registrations here in the UK, and at some point, I think that was 2023 up until June 2023, what you're seeing is an average of 70 businesses registered per hour in the UK alone, and a reasonable number of them are dissolved as well.
Yeah.
What we're beginning to see is, because of the ease, it's never been easier to start a business, than today. So what that means is a lot of people go on and start businesses, many of those that have no idea of what the process is like. And then what you're going to see is that it's becoming much more competitive. To start a business, make it profitable, make it financially sustainable. Those are very difficult things to do. So for people that are on this journey to starting a business, trying to make it successful, financially successful, and hopefully at some point exit the business, what would you advise that they should be doing? What are some of the key ingredients that you've seen over your career that makes a business successful? Okay.
So we're stepping aside slightly from what we're doing and industries, because in general, we are investing in established businesses. So a lot of the businesses we're talking with today might be 10, 15, 20, or even older, right? But I also have in my career, I guess, looked at younger companies as well. And I think as with any business, ultimately it comes down to thinking about competitive advantage. What is it truly that makes your product or service kind of differentiated versus peers? What is it that is there something that means that your customer has to keep buying your product? You might have something which is the significantly differentiated versus your competitors, that mean the customer really has no other choice. So as much as possible, try to think in terms of strategy of how you can put yourself in that position so that you become indispensable or mission critical to the customer. I think is vitally important. And then also, I guess another part of entrepreneurship is also thinking about the market, and is there a big enough opportunity for what you're trying to do. And you can have, and we see this quite a lot, is you can have some fantastic businesses that operate in great niches, but they're not growth businesses, because those niches are by definition quite small areas of the market. But those can be fantastic and sustainable businesses as well.
Okay, so great. I do a lot of workshops, business upon stuff like that for early stage entrepreneurs, and I couldn't agree more with what you said. Differentiation is key, I think. You just again, excuse. Sorry. Okay, so I've muted her there. Differentiation is very important. It does really make a huge difference when people have something clear differentiation. But I think sometimes it's not that easy to be able to come up with something that differentiates. But I think it's also very important to sort of highlight that differentiation can also be in the way you market, the way you distribute the product. Sometimes differentiation doesn't have to be heavily in the product itself. So say for example, there might be a service that I provide that quite a few other people provides. But if customers reach out to me and I reply to them within 30 minutes and my competitors take maybe half the day, that is something already that differentiates me. So I think it's also what noting that these other elements can be points of differentiation for a business as well. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, Jonathan.
No, absolutely. I mean, service and reliability are critical for the customer, right? Especially if you're, running a business where time and it's coming back to the example I gave earlier. If you're running a plant that is very expensive to run, if you run out of key components, then that's going to cause big financial impact. So if you have a supplier that's reliable, delivers everything on time, that you don't have problems with, then everything else equal, that's the supplier you're going to go with, right? Maybe another example is we see business models where again the product itself might not be particularly differentiated, but so for example a kind of technical distribution business where what the customer themselves doesn't have necessarily in-house the knowledge of the product that they're buying, so they kind of outsource the expertise to the distributor who's selling them the product. For finding out exactly what fastener or what screw or what valve they need to use for a particular application, they will often need to seek expert advice. And so a technical distributor can provide that role by providing kind of technical advice on what exactly the product is that they need. So that also can be another example of a slightly different competitive advantage.
Okay, great, thank you. Now we're sort of just 6 minutes away from finishing off the call. We're going to do a spinner very soon, but before we do the spinner, the giveaway, because we usually have giveaways, before we carry on, I don't know if there's any American on the call at the moment. We usually have $50 worth of snacks from Fully Charged Allergy Friendly Snacks. So I do not know if there's any American on the call at the moment, but if there is any Americans other than Tim, because Tim is the sponsor of it, if you could just type your name in the chat, that would be great so that we know that you are on the call. But before we go, Jonathan, what are your final comments? What do you want to leave us with before we end the call today?
I mean, one of our primary missions is there are this kind of large community of very successful, best-in-class UK businesses, and we think that our business model, which is about permanent ownership, about giving the management teams continued autonomy to pursue the strategy that's made the business a success, is in many cases the best solutions for those businesses as they go forward. So that's probably the key message in terms of what we're looking to do and what we're looking to achieve.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So we're going to do the spinner now. I've tried to include everybody on it, but the thing is, some people have joined in and some people have left, so we might have some problems there, but I've tried to do my best and hopefully this is sufficient. So I'm going to share my screen now and we're going to go ahead and we're going to do the spinner. And for this spinner, we usually would be giving away two £30 Amazon vouchers. So going to spin it. I'm going to share my screen here. Share my screen. So it's going to expand this. so that we do have one, and we're going to spin. So Taylor Campbell, Taylor, could you please pop your email in the chat and I'll reach out to you shortly after the call. So I'm going to take Taylor off now. Going to do one more spin. So we have Dan as well. Could you please pop your email in the chat and we will be in touch. So we have two winners for the Amazon vouchers. We have Taylor Campbell and we have Dan. So Taylor and Dan, if you could please pop your emails in the chat so that I can, reach out to you for, to tell you to send out this. So Dan, I think is currently, so Dan Jason and Taylor Campbell. So let me make sure Taylor's on the call. Yeah, Taylor's on the call as well. So it's fine. I do have a registration. So even if, you're not there, it's okay. Jonathan, Tim, thanks you for for the conversation today. It's positive to see a buy, hold, and grow a business, buy a business as an investment. Exactly. Those were my thoughts as well. It's very good to see that. So thank you very much, Jonathan, for your time today and just the generosity of your expertise. And it's very interesting. And, we will keep a close eye on industries. And it's very impressive to see what you're doing. Like I've said, private equity hasn't really got the best of reputations, and you might know why. But thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah.
And this business model that you've introduced, I'm sure there'll be other people that'll be willing to see how it turns out. And I know it will certainly be successful. So I do wish you all the best with it. We will be in touch anyways. So thank you for your time. I've taken a note of the emails, Dan and Taylor. So thank you for sharing.
Winifred, I was just going to say at the end, if you are interested in following our journey, obviously feel free to follow us on places like LinkedIn. So N Industry has a page on LinkedIn. So please feel free to follow us there. Otherwise, happy to share updates as we progress. But excited about our journey and appreciate your time, everyone's time today. So thank you.
All right, thank you. I follow you on LinkedIn. I follow N Industries on LinkedIn already. So
great. Thank you again.
You're welcome. All right, so bye everyone. The recording, once it's ready, I'll send it out via our newsletter. And it's been great. It's been a great conversation, and I'll see you for next month's fireside chat. So bye everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Jonathan. Bye, team. Bye, everyone.